Hi, I'm Greg Horn. Welcome to Hope is Here. I want to talk to you about a topic that I know that probably all of us have been at some point. It's when you're in what's called the land between. You're just like, God, I don't know where you're working. I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. And, there's lots of instances where that happens. And I heard a talk by Jeff Manion, who spoke at the Leadership Summit. It's been about 10 years ago. Jeff is a senior pastor at Otta Bible Church in Otta, Michigan. And I'd never heard him before he gave this talk, but since then it's just been a game changer for me, just reminding me that God is with us when you're in the land between. And I know a lot of people listening, maybe you feel like you're in that right now. You're just like, man, am I ever going to move out of this season of my life? And, Jeff just gave several examples that, such as when a college student graduation day comes and there just isn't a job available that has anything to do with the 4 years of studying that they've just gone through, and said, this is the land of being in between. In the land between, he said, we use language like for now. As in, for now, I'm living with my parents. For now, I'm working at the same clothing store I worked at when I was a senior in high school. And that's when you're in the land between. Maybe we're doing a job in between jobs that are a passion or our career. And we've all been there. But the land between is not just for people in college or people in job transition. Maybe you're a real estate agent. You're up late thinking, man, the kids have gone to bed, and you just keep repeating that number 5. I've sold 5 homes this year, and you look back over 2016 and you saw, man, I actually sold 27 homes then, more than one every 2 weeks. Now here it is in 2018, and we're already halfway through the year, and I've only sold 5. And, man, how much longer can I do this? How much longer can we bleed financially before I find a different job? Jeff Manion says, welcome to the land between. Maybe it's a mom walking through her home and she picks up a 10-year-old family picture. She looks into the eyes of her daughter, who was 7 at the time. Now the daughter's 17, distant, defiant, and angry. But she looks at that family picture and the kid looks free and innocent and happy. The mom says to herself, where did that kid go? And you know what? We're trying to do ministry at the church. But right now, that mom's just trying to figure out how to heal her own family. This is when you're in the land between. A lot of us find ourselves there today in the land between. You pass into a discouragement, a depression. You don't know how you got in it, and you don't know how you're going to get out of it. You just know that right now, prayer doesn't seem to be working, and you hope it ends soon. Welcome to the land between. The Bible has a great story about some people that were in the land between. The Israelites. Some of you probably know this story. The land between is the Sinai Desert. On the left is the green of Egypt. On the right is the green of Canaan. In this story, the Israelites have left Egypt. They were in slavery there for generations. And God called Moses, who didn't want this job to begin with, to go to Egypt and say to Pharaoh, let my people go. When Moses is commissioned, God says to him, I've heard the groaning of my people. I've seen their misery. I am concerned, and I've come to rescue them. Some of you today are wondering, has God seen your misery, and is he even concerned? I want to remind you today that he does, and that God hurts when you hurt. God went on to say to Moses, now I will take them out of the land of slavery, and I will take them into the land of promise. He doesn't mention any space in between. God doesn't. It's just, I'll take them out of the land of Egypt into the land of promise. In Egypt, though, it was the land of slavery. It flourished. Things just grew there. The Israelites were actually a slave people, but they were a slave people in a fertile land, and they're on their way to the land of promise, Canaan, which also flourished agriculturally. But right now, they're not in Egypt, the land of slavery. They are not in Canaan, the land of milk and honey. They are in the land of in between. God provided a food substance for these people called manna, which meant, what is it? Because that's what they asked when it fell to the ground. They would go out in the morning and there were with the dew were these flakes, and they would gather these flakes and grind it up to make mush or bake it into cakes. This was a substance that God provided for the Israelites from his gracious heart for them to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner day after day. In Numbers chapter 11, there was about to be a riot over this issue of manna. The rabble then began to crave other food, and again the Israelites started wailing and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, also the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna." You know, I can relate that sometimes. I mean, you know, you only like to eat certain things so many times, and, you know, same thing, grilled chicken or hot dogs, hamburgers, you know, and just keep rotating those things. Yet, to their credit, they didn't even have that. They just, let's say, had hot dogs every meal. Not only this for dinner and lunch, they were having to have that for breakfast. So, you know, you might not think much would grow in the desert, but the land between is fertile ground for complaint. That's one thing, it'll definitely grow. And a lot of you right now may feel like you're in a desert. You're in that land between. And, you know, complaining is easy to do. And, you know, as so-called mature followers of Jesus, we might judge the Israelites for complaining after them seeing so many miracles that God has done. But have you ever eaten the same meal over and over? Jeff's friend, Kevin, he took a 2-week skiing trip. They would ski all day, get to the base of a mountain, summit the mountain, come back down, and camp out. Every single day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 2 weeks, they had macaroni and cheese. And Kevin did not want to eat it again after this trip for the next 5 years. You know, it's possible to look at a story like this and place ourselves above the characters and think, yeah, I'd never do anything like that. But it actually may be healthier to place ourselves among the characters and think, given the right set of circumstances, I would be right there with them. You know, this is serious because they were not simply complaining about their condition. They're complaining against God, and there's a difference. In longing for the days of Egypt, as if they were saying, we are better off without you, God. There's something about this that is bordering on cosmic treason, Jeff Manion said. Manion encourages us to guard your heart in the land between, because there is something about the spirit of complaint which could whisper, God, I was actually better off with you in my life. I want to ask you today, have you ever prayed that? I know there's been times in my life that I've been discouraged, and I've doubted if God was even there. And, you know, I've had to apologize many times because as I got on the other side of the storm that I was in, I saw that God was actually with me. It's like the wonderful poem, The Footprints in the Sand, where, you know, the person cries out saying, God, where were you when I was going through the deepest, darkest times in my life? You know, we were walking alongside the beach, and then all of a sudden there was just one set of footprints when things got really, really rough. Where were you, God? And at the end of the poem, basically, it's summarized by God says, that one set of footprints was me. I was carrying you while you were walking through the storm. That was my set of footprints. And here at the age of 53 years old, I am 53 years of age. I know that's so, so true, that God never leaves you. He never forsakes you. And for some of you today, you're doubting God. And I want to say to you, that's okay. But I also want to encourage you to remind you of all the blessings that God's provided you. And, you know, I just want to encourage you to guard your heart in the land of in-between. Because one of the things about land for in-between is it's fertile ground for emotional meltdowns, isn't it? Now the question, Manion says, is how is God going to meet his servant Moses? If you remember correctly, back in Numbers, Moses didn't want the job to begin with. You know, some of us have been there. We've gotten promotions or jobs that we didn't want, and Moses is no different. He asked God, why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you that you put the burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant to the land you promised on oath to their forefathers? Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me, give us meat to eat. I cannot carry all these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. Wow. That's in Numbers chapter 11, verses 11 through 14. You know, some of you get concerned about having a tough conversation with God. How about that right there? And yet God did not strike Moses down with lightning. But you know what? The land between is not only fertile ground for complaint, it's also fertile ground for emotional meltdown. If you think that term is too strong, you look at Numbers chapter 11, verse 15. If this is how you're going to treat me, put me to death right now, Moses said. If I have found favor in your eyes, do not let me face my own ruin. I think it's safe to say here that Moses had had enough. Whose voice do you hear other than the voice of Moses? You know, there's a voice of a couple who has gone in for a medical test after medical test, and yet there's no solid diagnosis yet. Finally, the wife just goes, this is too heavy. I can't carry this anymore. There's a voice of parents who are trying to serve the church, and they have a child who has run far from them and far from God, whose heart is inaccessible, and they don't even know if this kid is ever going to come back. There's a breaking point where they say, this is just too heavy. I can't carry this anymore. There's a voice of a pastor. He's just trying to navigate ministry in the middle of a divisive split. God, I can't carry this anymore. And I can say to you that I felt that way at times when I was walking through some really challenging seasons when I was executive pastor of a large church in central Kentucky. Felt that way so many times. There's also the voice of a camp director staring at a list of 14 telephone numbers representing 14 phone calls that he's got to make. It has come to light that this summer, a 23-year-old counselor was involved with a 16-year-old camper, and there's a pregnancy. The director has to call the board members and a few donors. He starts to work his way through the list, conversation after conversation, and he feels like someone has hooked him up to a hose, and it is just draining him dry. That night, he is absolutely drained, but he cannot sleep. He just goes, God, this is too heavy. I cannot carry this anymore. You know, anybody who serves in a leadership capacity for any length of time understands this emotion. It doesn't matter the country or the position. Throw yourself into spiritual leadership, and you will have moments when you come to the end of yourself. You know, I love that in this story that Jeff Manion shares at the Leadership Summit 10 years ago that really blessed me. He said, you know, the church that he was at a Bible Church in Adam, Michigan's a sizable church, but it took forever to get off the ground. He and his wife were married at 21 years old, and he started preaching at the church a couple months later. You imagine being that young and doing a church plant. It was a failed church plant of 20 or 25 people, and they asked him just to preach there until they found another pastor. He ended up staying, and it started to grow. Over 103 years, as young couples and college students made this church their home. It was euphoric seeing the church grow, and as he charted out the growth, he projected where they would be in 2 years. They announced they were going to move out of the house they were meeting in and start building their own the following April. Then in April, Jeff had the leadership challenge and standing in front of the congregation and saying that their plan and funding weren't coming together like he thought it would. And rather than rush into a building program, they weren't ready. They'd have to hold off until the next April. People thanked him for not leading him into a program they weren't ready for. During that year, a manufacturing company offered to buy the property, which would generate cash to build the building, but they would have to relocate. And during all this deliberation, the clock was ticking. The next April, Jeff had to announce they were delaying again to the next April, and nobody thanked him that Sunday. Again, the following April, they weren't ready. And so you can imagine where this is going, but I'm going to continue this. I want to invite you to join me again on Hope is Here as we talk about when you are in the land between. I'm Greg Horn. We'll see you next time on Hope is Here.
Hi, I'm Tay Henderson, Executive Director of Lighthouse Ministries. In addition to serving meals twice a day to our hungry Lexington neighbors, we also provide shoes through our Michael's Feet ministry. In June of 2014, I noticed that many of the people we were serving did not have adequate shoes. If they weren't duct taped together, there were holes in the soles. The day that a man named Michael approached me with Scotch tape holding his shoes together, I knew I had to do something, and Michael's Feet Ministry was born. Now we are blessed to replace over 50 pairs each month thanks to individual donors and donating businesses through WJMM. Please consider being a part of this blessing. Each pair you give replaces a battered pair and helps a battered person know they are loved. Thank you.
For more information on Lighthouse Ministries, check out their website at lighthouselex.org or contact them by phone at 859-259-3434.